Hi, this is Teddy, and you're listening to Two Broads Talking Politics with journalist Erin Geiger Smith and me.
Are you listening?
Hi, this is Teddy, and this is Teddy Talks, a series within Two Broads Talking Politics. I'm here with my assistant, my mom. Hi, Mommy.
Hi, Teddy. I'm very excited to be with you and to be the assistant today.
And today with us is journalist Erin Geiger Smith, author of the recent book Thank You for Voting and a companion, Thank You for Voting Young Readers Edition. Welcome to the podcast, Erin.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I can't wait to talk to you and hear what you have to say, what your questions are.
My first question is, how did you become interested in writing about voting?
Well, I've been a reporter for a fairly long time, and before that, I was a lawyer. And so I've been interested in voting and voting laws since I went to law school. And then when I was a reporter, sometimes I would cover cases that dealt with voting or elections or things like that. And I always follow the Supreme Court decisions really closely. So I've always been interested in voting. But after the 2016 election, when there were so many questions about how it worked and what happened with the polls and the role that the media played, and since I'm part of the media, you know, what my colleagues who cover elections had, how they had handled this election. So I just kept having more questions and decided I wanted to try to answer some of them. So that's how it started. I just wanted to learn more about voting, and that turned into this book.
I see. This is just a little side question, not really in my list of questions.
Perfect. I love side questions.
What kind of reporter were you? A newspaper reporter, TV reporter?
Mostly a newspaper reporter. So I worked for websites too. My very first job in journalism was at a website that's called Business Insider. And then I worked at Reuters, which is a sort of fast-moving news service that gets the news out as quickly as possible. And that runs mostly in newspapers too. And then I wrote a lot of stories on all sorts of topics for the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. So mostly newspapers, but some website stuff too.
Do you think that'd be a fun job, Teddy?
I think it would.
I already think you'd be pretty good at it.
Job in the world, but
that is true. That you have to work, you have to love it. That's an important note for all aspiring journalists.
My second question is, how did you decide to write a young reader's edition of this book, and who do you hope reads it?
Well, you know, it wasn't my idea, I have to admit. It was my editors. Once I pitched what this book would be about and started reporting more of it, my editors came to me and said they thought it would be a great thing to adapt for young readers. And so I was so excited about it because I do think the information is so important to know about voting and know about reading the news. And so it's for kids ages 8 to 12. So you just got in there. Luckily, I can tell, so smart and ready to read. So
I've been reading for a long time.
Yeah, I believe it. What are your favorite things to read? Can I ask a side question? Is that allowed?
Sure. Two of my favorite things to read are Rick Riordan's Heroes of Olympus and Percy Jackson. Percy Jackson goes first, then Heroes of Olympus.
Got it. Those are good ones.
It's about mythology mixed in with modern-day technology. Greek
That's
mythology.
Very cool. I'm going to tell my son to read those because he's just now starting to read big books like that. So I'm going to tell him.
And Magnus Chase.
Okay. Noted.
And if her son's 6, what is your 6-year-old brother's favorite book or books?
Dragon Masters.
Okay. We don't have that one. Dragon Masters. Perfect.
So my third question is, what most surprised you in researching for Thank You for Voting?
I was surprised over and over again that not enough of us vote. I really was surprised. It was almost every time I read the statistics, I just thought, again, we've got to do so much better. So that part really surprised me, just that not enough people vote. And then the other thing that was maybe my most fun thing was that holding voting parties, that if towns host voting parties that are for the whole family, not just everyone that can vote, but if you hold a gathering on election day or on an early voting day, that people are more likely to vote in that town. That might be a hard thing to have this year, but I think it's really exciting going forward that we can do things like that. One of the people I talked to said that we need to make election days like the 4th of July. And that was my favorite thing that I heard, because I think that's a great plan.
Do you take your 6-year-old with you to vote?
I do. And since researching this book, instead of just taking him to vote, I make sure and talk about all the things about it, that I had to register to vote, and when is the first time that I, as a woman in this country, and specifically a white woman in this country, would have been able to vote. And I have him ask the poll workers a question. Make sure if you go with your mom to ask the poll workers a question next time, because they're there to help us all out. So he does go to vote. Sometimes he loves it, and sometimes he feels like it takes a little bit too long. So like all of us, it depends on our mood that day, but we do always go do it.
Teddy's favorite question for the poll workers is whether they have snacks for him.
They have snacks, sir.
Do they provide snacks? Have they had any good stuff?
Yep.
That's good. They need snacks. They're there all day. So it's actually probably a good idea for them to bring snacks. Yeah.
And they're also for the people who vote.
Yep. If asked, I think you probably have to be pretty cute and charming. My son one time asked how they felt about Batman, and that was a great conversation. So really, any question is on the table.
And it helped them pass the time.
Exactly.
One time, Teddy got donut holes when we went to vote. It was a midterm election, and so must have been 2014, so there weren't as many people voting that year. And I think they just had a lot of leftover donut holes instead.
I try to sell that the sticker is a great thing, but I didn't know that donut holes were on the table. So sticker, donut holes, best, voting sticker, second best.
We don't have stickers in Chicago, so.
Really?
We get bracelets, but not stickers.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Just another little side question. You haven't really mentioned your 6-year-old in the book.
Well, he gets top billing in that the book is dedicated to him.
Oh.
So he's the future voter. I feel like he gets a mention somewhere, but all of a sudden it's escaping me. But you know what? Who I did sneak in is there's a section where I had to describe ranked choice voting, and I wanted to use names that are A, B, C, and D to make it easy on everyone. People. I do. Aubrey is my niece, and Brian is my husband, and Carson is my very younger cousin, and Debbie is my mom. So everyone got in there, and I had made my mom the loser of the election so I could get rid of D first. And she was kind of bummed when she read that part. She said she would have rather been the first choice. So even when you put people in there, you can still get some complaints.
It's your book. You get to do whatever you want with it.
Listen, Teddy, I'm going to give them, next time I have a reader with a concern, I'm going to send them straight to you.
Your son's name is Reed?
Yep.
Teddy, I don't know if you remember this, in 2018 when we made signs for Tiffany Bond for Congress in Maine.
Nope. Don't remember it.
So I had interviewed Tiffany Bond, who was running as an independent for Congress in 2018 in the Maine 2nd District. And she did not win, but because they had ranked choice voting, her voters ended up deciding the election.
It's really pretty cool. The ranked choice voting allows third-party candidates to get in the race and let people who support them feel good about it and get to use their voice. I think the ranked choice voting is really interesting and something that people think is confusing, but once it's sort of worked out, I think it makes everyone a lot happier. So it's a good example to have of how it can work out. and you're a sign maker for it, even if you don't exactly remember. I bet the signs were pretty great.
Mm-hmm. So my fourth question, I'm really interested in the Electoral College, the unique way we elect presidents in the U.S. Do you think it will still be how we elect presidents by the time I'm voting?
You know, it's anyone's guess, because if there was somehow a huge shift in the way people felt about it all of a sudden, it could change over a couple years. But I think it's going to be around for a little bit longer. So maybe it'll still be here when you vote, but I don't think it'll be here
Would my
your
children
whole life.
Vote?
Yeah, let's say not when your children vote, but really that's a guess, because it has been around for a really long time and people have wanted to change it too for a really long time. There's been lots of tries to change it.
And we don't know the exact time, how long I'll live and what time I'll have my children at.
That is
that's
true.
Just
it's all
estimated guess.
It gives us a wide variety. Yeah, it's sort of when it's good when you're guessing, because it allows you to hedge a little bit. I could just say, well, Teddy, you had kids too early. I was planning for way later. So when you come back to complain about that guess, I'll be able to have some wiggle room. But I do think there's a lot of people who want it to change, and then there's a lot of people who want to keep it. And it's really going to be, I think, how the people in those states that have the most power for the Electoral College, that are sort of the swing states, it'll depend on if they keep wanting to have it or if there's a big change. But, another question that isn't answered is, I asked every single Electoral College expert that I talked to, what happens if we have several elections in a row, like in 2016, when the popular vote, the person who got the most votes from the country, and the Electoral College don't match up like they did in 2016, with Donald Trump winning the Electoral College and Hillary Clinton winning the popular vote. And no one had a good answer of what happens 3 times. If that happens 3 times in a row, is the public just going to get fed up and force their lawmakers to do something or not? It's really anyone's guess. But there isn't a plan. It'll be up to the people. So it's kind of interesting. So maybe you'll see something really exciting, Teddy, even before you're 9.
If there's any Republican listeners watching this, no offense, but I really wanted Hillary to win. It's too bad that Trump won.
Well, that's the thing about elections, is they keep coming around, and probably it does feel like a long time ago, but we're close. You only have 2.5 weeks to go. Are you ready to go? Are you guys going to vote by mail, do you think, or you're going to vote in person with your mom?
I think we would probably vote by mail.
We've already applied to vote by mail, yeah. But it'll be our first time.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of people's first time. And what's the most important thing if you're doing something for the first time? Follow the directions very closely. So you have to help your mom make sure you guys read. Will you make sure she signs in the right place? Can I trust you to confirm? Okay, good. That is one check off my list of worries. But it'll be exciting to vote by mail. It means you'll get to sit right there and read through the whole thing. Take a little more time than usual.
And you won't get yelled at. When we vote in person, we've occasionally let them touch the touch screen, and apparently we're not supposed to do that. But
now we can write it.
Touch the ballot if it's by mail.
That's right.
Even if you write nobody will think that handwriting is mine. It could have just been hers.
They might if you sign it, because my signature is on file somewhere. So we'll have to be careful about that.
Yeah, that rule.
But I could just write who I want to do
But the filling in, I feel like you could fill out some ovals.
Teddy, would it be okay if I ask a question?
Sure.
So I was thinking about how surprising it seems how recently some people got the right to vote. So we're just at 100 years this month since white women have had the right to vote in this country.
Right.
And I looked it up because I was interested that when Teddy's grandparents turned 18, they did not have the right to vote. That constitutional amendment didn't come around until a couple years later. So 18-year-olds haven't had the right to vote for very long at all.
Yeah,
so,
not very long at all. 1972.
Yeah. So are there groups of potential voters right now who are still trying to get the right to vote? And, what does sort of the future fights like that look like?
Well, in the United States, if you're over 18 now and a citizen, then you should be able to vote. The only exception to that's on the books is in some states where if people have been convicted of a serious crime called a felony, then they may not be able to vote or may not be able to vote for a period of time. But that's actually something that is changing in a lot of states. A lot of states are reinstating rights for those who have a felony conviction, which is something, interestingly, that's supported, of course, not across the board, but has bipartisan support because Americans like second chances. But there are still people who it is more difficult for them to vote because they might not have enough polling stations in their city, and so they have to travel too far or don't have public transportation, or they might need an ID that's hard for them to have. So even though we have rules where nearly everybody is able to vote, we still make it tougher for some people.
It's not really clear to me if America still uses literacy tests.
They do not use literacy tests. That was something that for a long time that kept a lot of people from voting, both people who had black or brown skin or also people who were new to the country from somewhere else and didn't speak English very well. But also sometimes it had very little to do with the person could maybe read really well, but the questions were crazy hard that, like I said at the top, I went to law school and I was lucky enough to go to college and do all of those things. And some of the questions I read and I had no idea the answer. And if you missed one of them, you failed the whole test. So we don't have literacy tests anymore, but we had them for a really, really long time. And it wasn't until the 1965 Voting Rights Acts and that was the big kickoff. And then some Supreme Court cases and updates after that really got rid of those literacy tests.
I think 8-year-olds should have the right to vote. What do you think, Teddy?
Yep.
You do?
I don't think that's going to happen soon, though.
I don't think 8, but there is some talk of having 16-year-olds vote or at least be able to vote in some state or local elections. So it's possible that will move down. But the truth is, Teddy, that no matter how old you are, you can have a lot of impact on the way people think. If you think of all the marches for climate change and the March for Our Lives kids that talked about school and gun safety, that was people that were a lot younger than 18 changing a lot of minds. So it's never, even if you can't vote yet, it's never too early to start helping people learn more about issues and if you're persuasive, like I feel like you are, not just teaching them, but maybe convincing them to think the way you do.
You were saying about young people having a lot of impact on the way people think, just like this podcast.
Exactly. I feel like anyone who listens will probably do whatever you tell them. Or close. Maybe not everything, but pretty close.
Now, my second to last question.
Penultimate.
What is the most important?
One of my favorite words. It really is.
Lots of people mess it up. What are the most important things kids like me can do to make sure our older friends and family vote?
Number one, it's to remind them to vote and to ask them if they'll promise you that they'll vote or pledge to you that they'll vote. Because when people make a pledge to vote, they really are more likely to do it. And if you really want to take extra steps, you can go to websites like vote.org or Vote 411 and find out when the deadlines are in your state to register to vote. And however you keep a calendar, if you write it down or somewhere, write yourself a reminder. And if you remind people when deadlines are, that's really helpful too. So that's an extra step. But the first is just ask them if they're going to vote and have them promise you that they'll do it.
We could write postcards to people.
We could.
Yeah, you can also, there are so many options of, you can write postcards to other states, since it seems like if you could vote, you would vote for Democratic candidates. You can find someone who will help you find voters in swing states. So if you don't live in a swing state, but you want to particularly talk about the presidential election, you can write postcards to people in other states. But it's also really important, no matter if you live in a red or blue state, to make sure you encourage people to vote in your state for governors or mayors, school board members. We're learning how very important all of those local officials are. Since during the coronavirus time, we found how important our mayors and school board and all those people are. So make sure you tell grownups not just to vote in the presidential election, but make sure they do all the other ones too.
Could I ask a little more of a grown-up question, Teddy?
Sure.
These two books came out just about 2 months ago, but we have seen very recently new attempts at voter suppression. So what should we all be doing to sort of ensure access to voting during both a pandemic and an assault on the Postal Service?
I mean, you're absolutely right that the difference in when this book went to press in March, it was a real stop the presses moment to get in more information in the grown-up book about vote by mail. But of course, at that point, I at least didn't anticipate that we were going to have to question whether the Postal Service was going to hold up. I really try to think of these questions as what makes it easiest for the voter. This is a particular election where we're going to have to ask a lot more of the voter. Voters are going to have to really check on what's going on in their local area. I think it's very important to decide if voting by mail is the best choice for you. And if it is, then follow those deadlines really, really closely. Do it as early as you can and consider what you can do to, spare the system a little bit. So I think both for voters and I hate even saying this, but the fewer pieces of mail in their ballots may be the better. So find out early what drop box options are going to be. To drop it off. And then if you can vote early safely, maybe consider doing that too. But I think it's going to be so important to make sure, whether you vote in person or by mail, to make sure you do it early and follow all of the rules. And then if you are voting by mail in a state that doesn't have the sophisticated ballot tracking, where, some states, California and Colorado, it's like tracking a UPS package. Call your board of elections and ask what's the best way that you can make sure your ballot was received and counted. Find out early if Teddy sneaks in and signs and it arrives and they say, hey, this doesn't look like your signature. Find out what your options are for curing a ballot if you did make a mistake, because it is no knock on anyone that doing something for the first time is difficult. And it happens that you forget to sign the outside or just, do something. I think some states it's, the right color ink. I mean, you got to follow the rules.
I don't think there's
be really proactive.
The right color of ink.
There might be in some places.
I wish I had the exact in my mind, but I just saw something this week that really surprised me. That was a rule that I was like, you really have to be on your game. So I think deciding how you are going to vote, making sure you do it all early, really follow the rules, and check what your options are to correct any mistakes, and what your options are to find out that your ballot was received. Also you can call your representatives and express your concern. Nonpartisan voting organizations have been pushing and pushing and pushing for more money for the Postal Service and more money for local elections boards. It hasn't happened yet. And obviously the time's close. So you can push your representatives to do that. But just really keeping abreast of what's going on and figuring out the best way to vote. it's just a very unique circumstance.
I voted in the Illinois primary the day before we went on quarantine.
So you did?
It was the very last thing I did in public. But it was right after social distancing. So there weren't masks yet, but there was social distancing. And so I went with my husband, with Teddy's dad, and we had to be 6 feet apart from each other, even in line, even though we lived together.
That ship has sailed.
So it did feel relatively safe, but
I did. So our New York primary was June 23rd, which was the day this book came out, which made it a very exciting day. But also I had applied to vote by mail and my ballot didn't come. So I did have to go vote in person that day. And I will say, I mean, clearly we can't speak for everything and everywhere. But my voting place was very safe. They'd moved it to somewhere much larger. So that was, it felt safe, and hopefully it'll feel that way to lots of other people who have to vote in person. But the other thing to stress, Teddy, do you have to hear about patience a lot? I have to talk to Reed about patience. And that's something that we are all going to have this year on election day, because we probably are not going to know the results on election day. And that's another thing to know about vote by mail. In a lot of states, it's going to take longer to count. And most of the time, that means that the system is working. So we're going to have patience. You might have to remind your mom, because I bet she's going to be feeling a little impatient on election night. So we're all going to you have to work on that. That's another thing you could tell adults, is remind them that they're going to have some patience on election night. And it could be a couple days, a week. I hope it's not longer, but I won't. Like the Electoral College, I'm going to make no promises.
Mommy, has our ballot come?
We've gotten our application for the ballot, but not the ballot itself yet.
So, one last thing. How can listeners buy both versions of Thank You for Voting?
Oh, what a good question. You can find it anywhere that you usually buy your books. So if you go to bookshop.org, you can buy it from an independent bookstore near you, or if your bookstores are open, walk in or give them a call, or, the big guys, Amazon and Barnes & Noble too. So they can find it anywhere, and both of them are usually listed right together. So even if you don't put in Young Readers Edition, it ought to be right there for you.
When you say to a bookstore near you, you sound like you're on some ad about books.
That's what I'm trying to do as my next job. I'm hoping I'll be asked to do bookstore ads. I finished writing the book. I gotta find my next gig. Ads about it.
Is there an audiobook too?
There is an audiobook of both the adult and the children's edition, not read by me because of my strong Texas accent.
Doesn't sound like it to me.
It doesn't. It does when I'm tired. When I'm tired, I sound very Texas. And I say y'all all the time.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us on Teddy Talks. I really enjoyed reading this book, and it was great to talk to you today.
Thanks for asking me to do this, Teddy. I've been looking forward to it all week.
Thank you for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Dimcast Podcast Network. Our theme song is called Are You Listening, off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Two Broads Talk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.